The opinions expressed on the radio program by the hosts, co hosts, guests, and call in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
Good evening. It's another Thoughtful Thursday, and you are on air with Ron and Romaine and Reason for Reason. It is Thursday, September 5th, less than 2 weeks into the new school year, and already another mass shooting. Innocent lives taken in senseless gun violence. How many times are we going to have to express our condolences, offer our thoughts and prayers to some aggrieved community across this nation? Well, I come on first and foremost by sending my thoughts, my prayers, my sympathies to the Winder, Georgia community, where 2 students and 2 members of the school staff were senselessly gunned down by one of their own students, a classmate. A classmate that the family thought it would just be a wonderful idea to buy them an assault weapon. Why does a 14-year-old need an assault weapon? Why does a 14-year-old need access to an assault weapon? We've seen this happen not long ago in Illinois, where a family of a child with some disturbance, some mental disturbance, thought, oh, well, that would, a present? Let's think. How about a handgun? And they went out and bought this young man a handgun, and he promptly took that gun to school and killed many of his classmates. This phenomenon, this constant violence, gun violence in our schools, it seems to be germane to this country. We don't see this sort of thing happening in what's called third world countries. In most third world countries, or what's called third world countries, I think the children feel relatively safe in school. Have we ever started to ask ourselves, what is the mindset of our young people in their classrooms? Do they feel safe? Do they feel that at any point during the school year, someone will burst in, probably someone they know, a classmate, and open fire? I think it's time that we put some of our elected officials on blast. And I'm not directing this at any particular party. I'm just directing this at those who say they are in a leadership position. Those on either side of the aisle that really aren't doing a damn thing. We have people in Washington wanting to control your body, specifically women's bodies, telling them when to give birth, when to get pregnant, should they use contraception. So we want to control a woman's body or the reproductive cycle, but we don't give a damn about controlling firearms and who gets them, no matter how dangerous an individual is. We talk about other countries and how dangerous other countries are. Well, America's probably the most dangerous country on the planet. By far, the most violent. In fact, Dr. King said before he met a very violent death that his government, the United States government, was the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. Folks, that was back in the 60s. What's changed? If I ask the average person, when was the first reported school shooting in America? How many people would know? What do you think, TP? When was the first reported school shooting in America?
I don't know.
Okay. The first reported school shooting in this country was 1966. University of Texas. They have had 58 years to get this figured out. So we're not just talking about, Columbine, which is 1999. We're not talking about Sandy Hook Elementary School. We're not talking about the school down in Uvalde, Texas. We're talking about 58 years of bloodshed on our schools and college campuses across this country. And our leadership can't figure out a damn thing. Some of them are saying the best possible answer to dealing with violence, is more violence. Let's put more armed people on the campus. Let's arm some of the teachers. That's actually an idea that has been floated. In fact, there's a school district here in Pennsylvania where that's exactly what they did. Take a teacher whose job it is to teach, to expand the minds of our young people, and they gave them some brief training and said, now you are going to go out up against someone who's heavily armed, and it's going to be you standing between them and the student body and your fellow faculty members. What sense does that make? What sense does any of it make? Years ago in this country, I can remember growing up in New York, and there would be a commercial that came on. And there was this catchy jingle said, look for the Union label when you were buying a coat dresser gown. What they were doing, they were talking about the labor movement, how important it is. Well, our government, along with corporate America, went to war with the labor movement. So now the jobs have gone overseas. Somebody thought that was a good idea as well, to sell off America's manufacturing base. Now what we are exporting around the world, appears to be two things. One is debt, and the other is violence. Debt because America borrows money every single day to keep this country afloat. Billions of dollars are borrowed every single day. So essentially, this country is broke, flat broke. What we have apparently is credit. And with decent credit ratings, you can continue to borrow billions of dollars. But what do we do with those billions of dollars we borrow? Are we putting money into our schools so that we can protect our children from events like what happened just yesterday? Are we putting money into our schools to better educate our students so that they can dream and achieve more than just a job in a store or to be a civil servant? Nothing wrong with those occupations. I mean, I myself was a civil servant. But nowadays, we need people who are thinking beyond that. This country is in very, very serious trouble. I don't care what the politicians tell you. They come on with these rosy predictions of how great America is and how much potential there is in this country. The reality is that this country is broke. The reality is that these people in this country, some of them, are morally and mentally broken. Some of us physically broken because we lack adequate health care. We have reportedly the greatest healthcare country, or the greatest healthcare system rather, in the world, on the entire planet. Yet we have the sickest people. I watched a documentary several years ago by a guy by the name of Michael Moore, and the documentary was called Sicko. And he was saying how in Europe, doctors who are paid a lot less than doctors here in this country, well, they get incentives as their patients improve. So as their health improves, the doctors are rewarded. That would make sense. In America, with all our technology, medical technology, and skill and learning, just the opposite is true. The sicker the patients, the more incentivized the doctors are. So that means if you have, say, if you're a doctor, let's say you have 100 patients and 99 of them are on, say, 4 or 5 prescription drugs or require some medical procedure requiring surgery. Well, people are going to shower you with incentives because you are doing exactly what they need you to do. Keep people sick, keep them coming back, keep them going to CVS, Walgreens, and all these other legalized drug dealers. Keep them going there, and we will make sure that you're rewarded. Folks, that's life in America in the 21st century. Just imagine a country that says we are first world as opposed to third world, whatever that's supposed to mean. We say that we are the lead nation in the free world. We say that we are America, the shining beacon, the last bastion of democracy. Yet we can't send our children to school without them, unfortunately, meeting the fate that befell 4 people just yesterday. I can see if this was the first time and we were ill prepared, but this happens over and over and over. And, police departments and other agencies train constantly for active shooters. And yet, there are more active shooters. More guns in the hands of people who shouldn't even be allowed to have a butter knife. So this young man reportedly had been showing signs of violent tendencies going back, a few years. So why was he allowed to stay in the school? And one thing about, this younger generation, strangely, about everything they do, they post it somewhere on social media. It does not take a rocket scientist or Sherlock Holmes to go on the social media and see these violent acts or these violent ideations where people basically tell you what they're planning. So it should come as no surprise when this young man shows up at the school armed to the teeth. Why didn't we know when he told you? And yet, for all of the things that we say make up America, yet we're still, and I'm sure without argue, the most violent country on the planet. And for us to be the shining beacon and the bastion of democracy, or last bastion of democracy, how is it we're supporting a genocide in the Gaza? How is it that people who have no means of self-defense, who've had their land taken since 1948, how is it they're the terrorists? How is it that the people in Gaza are referred to as terrorists, yet the same sort of activity that befell or is happening to people in Gaza is the same thing that happened to the people in Northern Ireland, but who still thinks of the IRA as a terrorist organization? Many people in this country of Irish descent supported the IRA. understood the plight of the people in Northern Ireland. 800 years of English rule. You know, it's kind of bizarre that in nature, everything wants to be free. Everything enjoys their freedom. Yet, some people have it in mind that if you are a freedom loving person and you resist attempts to take away your freedom, you become a terrorist. You become a threat. You are the people that should be locked up. Not the people who come in and take your home, rape your women, kill your men, take your land, take your possessions. They are somehow the innocent ones who go on TV and say, oh, we're just defending ourselves against terrorism. You know, it's interesting that someone like Nelson Mandela is pretty much universally recognized as a hero. And yet, in this country, Nelson Mandela was on the terror watch list even while he was the president of South Africa. If you don't believe me, just go look it up. Imagine a man who never committed a violent act in his life, a man who was an attorney who used the court system to fight for freedom and for the rights of South Africans or Black South Africans. He was called a terrorist. Not the people who came down from Europe with superior weapons. The people who slaughtered the indigenous Africans, well, they say, well, we fought for it. The land is ours. Well, when Hitler took over Holland, well, couldn't Hitler have said, hey, I fought for it. It's mine? Well, no. After the war, the people of Holland were freed. Well, for years, the people who went to South Africa from Holland and called themselves the Boers, they created a system called apartheid. They thought, well, look, South Africa is a vast piece of land. And there are so many natural resources there. We have lots of gold, lots of diamonds. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to South Africa. We're going to kill the indigenous South Africans, and we're going to take the best land, the land where the resources are, and we're going to push the indigenous Africans out into what's called, I guess you call it the Bantu, or out into the townships. The townships were basically slums. In fact, worse than slums. Sort of like Harlem, or sections of Harlem back when I was a kid, late 60s, early 70s, when there was nothing but tenements and high rises made up of people struggling to survive. Yeah, I think that the ideas of the colonial powers, it hasn't changed much over the centuries. They do the same things. And what happened yesterday is just a very clear example of something Malcolm X said somewhere about 1963. After President John F. Kennedy was killed, Malcolm X said that the chickens have come home to roost. He was talking about the violence that America had been, or has, and is, and has been purveying around the world. Well, it came home and it struck the head of this nation, the president. John Kennedy has been dead now for 61 years. And yet, we still don't know exactly who killed him. Why? Well, because the government apparently wants to cover up the real truth. Oh, they told us it was the mafia. They told us it was the Cubans. Next, it would probably be space aliens that had advanced guns or advanced ammunition rather, that made U-turns because the shots that hit Kennedy somehow made U-turns and hit Governor Connolly as well. So it had to be probably an advanced alien race of people who were using this advanced weaponry against the president. Why they shot him? Well, who knows? What would be their purpose or objective in shooting him? Well, who knows that? But I do know that President Kennedy had proposed getting rid of the CIA. He also proposed getting rid of the Federal Reserve System. Didn't want to go into Southeast Asia, specifically Vietnam, nor did he want to invade Cuba to assassinate Fidel Castro. You know, you would think that somebody who wants to be peaceful, who does not want to go around the world causing bloodshed, you would think that person would be appreciated, in fact, honored. Nope, nope, that was not the case with Kennedy. In this country, if you kill someone, you're a hero. You save someone's life, maybe. But you definitely get all of the medals and all the accolades for killing someone. You know, folks, I just think that we need to have serious conversations. First, with ourselves, with our families, our friends. So we are about just over 2 months away from the next election. So we have former President Donald Trump. He's going up against current Vice President Kamala Harris. See, these two, Mrs. Harris and Mr. Trump, expect us to go out in record numbers and vote for them. But vote for them to do what? Let's just think for a second. America is about $36 trillion in debt. You ever ask yourself, who exactly are we in debt to? If the Federal Reserve prints the money, how can we be in debt to ourselves? You ever ask yourself who we owe? Anyway, we'll come back to that. All of the money that was earmarked for this program that Biden touted for infrastructure. Well, you know, if you travel to Europe, and I've done a few countries in Europe, you can basically travel all around the continent of Europe by rail. Here we are in America, and we can't get to New York City from Northeast Pennsylvania. Let me say that again. We cannot get from Northeast Pennsylvania to New York City by rail. We talk about climate change. Some call it global warming. Well, scientists are saying that we need to reduce our carbon footprint. Another way of saying that would be we need to get some of the cars off the road. Trains can run on electricity. Wouldn't it make sense to take some of that money that Biden had earmarked for things like transportation, like trains, and actually put the train in to reduce our carbon footprint? That's not going to happen. Where did all that money go? Billions of dollars. Where did it go? Where does it all go? How many people play, say, the lottery on a daily basis? Just stop and think for a second. 48 contiguous states, and 2, Alaska and Hawaii. So 50 states. All of them have lottery, Powerball, Mega Millions. Where does all that money go? Here in Pennsylvania, they tell us, well, it goes to aid the elderly. Do you see any improvement in the lives of the elderly in your community? You see people in their 70s, 80s, still at places like Walmart being greeters. If that money was going to improve their life, do you think they would be out in their late 70s and early 80s, standing at doors greeting people? I mean, some would, because those are just nice people who want to be out, who want to contribute. But for the most part, these people simply can't afford to retire. So where's all that money going? Since October 7th, Israel, well, let me not say Israel, let me say Benjamin Netanyahu and his Likud party, they have been bombing away in Gaza. I think the most recent statistics show that over 40,000 people have died in Gaza. And yet the other day, they say that 6 bodies were recovered. They say these people were hostages. And they say that they were killed by Hamas. That's what the media is reporting. How does the media know who killed them? Any evidence that it was Hamas? Or is it just an assumption? I can remember several months ago, there were 3 Israelis coming out of a tunnel, and Israel opened fire on them, killed all 3. And then their statement went something along the line of, oops. So if Israel killed 3 of their own citizens, who's to say Israel did not kill these 6? No, I'm not saying they did. I'm not saying they didn't. I wasn't there. Neither was the media. So how are we saying it was Hamas? But anyway, let's go back to our financial situation for a second. I said let's go back to that. Somewhere about 1913, the amendment was put in place that created the Federal Reserve. So our money is printed by the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve controls interest rates and the flow of currency. Well, who controls the Federal Reserve? Is it federal? The reality is, folks, the Federal Reserve banks, not just here but around the globe, are owned by a group of families, corporations, that America is in debt to. In fact, all of the industrialized nations are in debt to a group of families. I think there's about 13 of them that loan money to governments. And I guess in case of the United States, since we have an ability to pay the money back, we're told that we're going to be the muscle. We're going to be the mafia for this cabal of super rich people. So when they tell us, hey, listen, Iraq is dripping with oil. So I don't care what you need to do, find a way to invade Iraq so that we can get our hands on that oil. So Saddam Hussein, who sat back and watched the events of 9/11 happen unfold on television, the next thing he knows, he's being told by former President George W. Bush, you got to disarm. Disarm what? Well, we know you have weapons of mass destruction over there, Saddam, and we're coming for them. And come we did. Hundreds of thousands of troops invaded Iraq. There was never any evidence that showed he had any involvement in what happened on 9/11. But countless Iraqis died. 20 years later, what did we get for all of that killing and all that expenditure? Gas prices are still extraordinarily high. So why all the killing? What was the purpose? They told us that Osama bin Laden was hiding in a cave in Afghanistan. Now let's think for a second. Guys hiding in a cave. One guy. So we can assume that he had some bodyguards if he's hiding in this cave. Well, we have smart bombs that are so intricate and so, I guess, smart, for lack of better terms, they can pinpoint a particular area and bomb away. So instead of sending hundreds of thousands of troops and materiel to a war zone, why didn't we just launch a surgical strike? We have drones on station all the time, flying over these so-called problem areas. You know, the fact of the matter is, there's an interview that David Frost did with a woman by the name of Benazir Bhutto. Benazir Bhutto, for those of you who do not know, was the Prime Minister of Pakistan. She was assassinated somewhere around 2009, I want to say. Well, prior to that assassination, she sat down with David Frost to talk about the conditions in what's called the Middle East. And one of the things she said in the interview was that she knew who killed Osama bin Laden. So apparently, Osama bin Laden was dead years before we said we got him. This man was called the most dangerous terrorist on the planet, and yet they didn't show us the body. They told us the scenes were just too gruesome. Was it any more gruesome than the scenes of children's bodies blown apart in Uvalde, Texas? Was it any more gruesome than the 2 students and the teachers killed just yesterday? Is it any more violent than some of the video games that our children play? But all of a sudden, we sought to protect the sensibilities of the American people. So much so that the most dangerous man on the planet is buried at sea so that no one could see the body? Yeah, that makes sense somewhere. Not quite sure where, but somewhere. So, folks, we need to have these conversations because we're being lied to, we're being deceived, and it's costing us. Not just financially, it's costing us our children. How many children are going to die in school before this year ends? The school year ends. How many more will die in these preemptive wars that we see keeps running off to? And it's always the same thing. There's a madman somewhere. Just so happens that all of these madmen have something in common. Typically, there's some resource that we want that the madman seems to have control of. So that was the case of Saddam Hussein, rivers of oil. Osama bin Laden, on the other hand, well, he was a little different. Osama bin Laden, it is now known, was a CIA operative. Had been so for years. Trained and prepared by the CIA and sent to Afghanistan in the late 70s to assist in a war with Russia. Now, how does Afghanistan, A country that we call backwards third world nation beat the Russians, who was behind what was then called, um, I know they called them the Mujahideen then, or no, they were called the Mujahideen then. Now they call them Al Qaeda and a few other names. But during that time, in a war against the Soviet Union, they were called the Mujahideen. Well, who was supplying them? Who trained them? Yes, folks, we did that. And the same people that we trained and supplied, now we have to fight them. And they're fighting us with some of the same weapons that we gave to them. Somehow, our elected officials think that makes sense. So, start having these conversations. Ask some tough questions. I know there's a debate coming up next Tuesday between the two leading candidates. Well, folks, make no mistake about it. You're not going to know anything about these two candidates after the debate that you didn't know before the debate. These questions that they answer are submitted in advance. There's no thinking involved. They know what they're going to be asked and who's going to ask it. One thing that both sides have in common, they're never going to answer a direct question. They're never going to talk to you, the American people. Oh, they'll talk around you. They'll talk down to you. They'll come and hold a rally and want you to listen to them. But they're never going to answer your questions. Why? Because you're going to ask questions that they aren't prepared to answer. So they get some questions that are fed to them, right? Easy, ground ball stuff. The stuff that we really need to know, we're not going to hear it on that debate stage. Folks, it's on you to open up your mind, to expand your thought, to do a little research. All of us have an encyclopedia in the palm of our hand in the form of a smartphone. Look up other things and say sports statistics. For guys, maybe women. For women, maybe men. Look up some other information. Find out what's really going on in this country. And then ask yourself, no matter who I vote for, is anything really going to change? Is America going to be made great again if Trump is elected? I don't think anyone, regardless of where you live, how light or how dark your skin, I don't think anyone would be upset about the prospect of America being great. But what exactly is great? Who determines what's great? Who decides when we've reached greatness? Everybody has their own definition or their own vision for America. Why are we only accepting one? So these are some of the things we need to talk to our children about, our spouse, our friends, our neighbors. We need to get the conversation rolling. See, they tell you don't talk religion and politics with friends because you may lose a friend. Fact of the matter is, religion and politics are two of the things that have the greatest or exercise the greatest control over us. How are you not going to talk about something that can take away your freedom, that can tell you when you can have a baby, that determines where you can go and when, that can send you off to war to die for a corporation? And they tell us don't talk about it. Well, while we're not talking about it, they are. They're planning the next war already. The pieces are already in place. Just think, folks, how many military bases have they closed? I'm talking about domestic military bases. Anybody remember Fort Dix, right over in Jersey?
Mm-hmm.
And so many others have been closed down. They're closing the bases here and opening up bases abroad in places like Australia, places like Poland. Why exactly would we be building a submarine base in Poland? I'm sorry, not Poland, Australia. Poland, we have military bases and we have soldiers stationed in Poland. Why would we be doing that? Don't we need protection here? Shouldn't we have more bases here in case a foreign adversary decides to attack? But no, our government thinks shut the bases, destroy the economy of the local communities that relied on the base, and send those bases overseas. These are the folks that we're voting for. These folks that should not be managers at McDonald's. But because they're charismatic, because they have a catchy line, we vote for them. We put them in power, on positions of power, and then we sit back and watch them run the country into the toilet. And then 4 years later, they convince us to vote for them again, to send us back, to send them back rather, to Washington. If you take someone who is destructive by nature and you put them in a position of power, what do you think's going to happen? Someone who's been destructive their whole life, all of a sudden, they're going to just stop being destructive because they have an elected official. So, folks, I just think it was time to put our elected officials on blast. I'm always putting them on blast, either here on air or in my writings, because it's just time that the American people wake up and realize it's time to fight back. The government always tells us they're fighting for us. Both parties, left, right, up, down, one side or the other, they always come with the same lines, same BS lines. We're fighting for you. They never tell you they're winning. They say they're fighting, but they never tell you they're winning. Let's look at the conditions in America and you'll know how we're losing all of these fights. Then they all come on and say, my name is Joe Blow and I approve of this message. They're supposed to be so different, but they're talking the same things constantly, but say that they're different. They say that one's left wing, one's right wing. Hell, all birds have two wings. Ain't it the same bird?
That's right.
That's what I thought.
Same bird.
That's right. So, folks, it's time for us to stop fighting amongst each other and stop fighting back against our government. They're the real threat. They're the ones who are responsible for all of these school shootings. This falls directly on Washington. They could have done something. In fact, when the gun makers wanted to sell assault weapons on the open market, the government could have said no. Instead, lobbyists from the gun lobby went down to Washington with suitcases full of money. And when they were spread enough money around, Congress turned and said, I don't care if you sell them nuclear weapons, as long as the money keeps flowing in my direction. And that's where we are, folks. Our children keep dying. Our dollar's worth nothing. Jobs, well, where are they? I can tell you where they are. Look in China. Look in India. Look at Vietnam. Look at places like Bangladesh. And I heard something the other day, well, actually a couple of weeks back. The president of Bangladesh had to flee. There was a coup. They said that Bangladesh is number one for producing things like clothing items. Bangladesh, not Brooklyn, not the Bronx, not Los Angeles, not Chicago, not Detroit, but Bangladesh. How did that happen? How do we go from look for the union label to look for any job? No benefits, less pay, but more, longer hours. We're heading back to the days when the workers had no power. If they wanted you to work 12-hour shifts 7 days a week, well, you had to show up. And slowly but surely, that's what's happening again. We talk about freedom, yet we want to put people in power who want to take away what little freedom you have left. And we think we are doing something by putting them in office. Do you think that for those who are Republican, I ask you this question. Do you think you're really punishing the Democrats on Capitol Hill by voting in the Republicans?
Hello?
Hi, this is Donna, but I can't talk. I just pulled up your phone. So I can add it to my
Do
phone.
you think
All right.
that
Text me then.
that's going to change anything?
I'm on the other radio station.
Is that what you think? Because the Democrats, you know what happens to them? Some of them may lose their seats. Some members of the squad already have. Cory Bush in Missouri. There's the other one from New York. Can't think of his name right now. But they've already lost their seats. But what's going to change fundamentally in Washington? You know, you go to a court, you look at the Statue of Liberty, you look at a movie and you see a woman with a scale. What's the purpose of the scale? The scale is about balance. See, the problem in this country's imbalanced. You go back years ago and men ran the show. And let's be specific. It was white men who ran the show. Women were thought to just be objects, to keep barefoot and pregnant and at home. Didn't want them to be necessarily well educated, didn't want to compete with them for jobs, set up a glass ceiling. Does anybody know what the rule of thumb is? It's a term we use all the time. Actuality, what the rule of thumb is, you are legally allowed to beat your wife as long as you did not leave a mark bigger than your thumb. That was the world for women in this country. Up until the 1970s, white women couldn't have a credit card, couldn't open a bank account. Would you believe that before white women could vote, black men could? And now we have people who want to be elected, who want to take away that fundamental right to vote. They say voting is speech. So what are they trying to tell us? They want us to shut up and remain silent while they run this country into the ground? While we go around the world bombing away at people and sending the people that you told to be silent off to fight? And fight who? Other poor people. People who are struggling to put food on the table, just like we are in this country. People who want a better life for their children, just like we want in this country. Every day, if you turn on Fox News, one of the lead stories is the southern border. What does the southern border have to do with the loss of 4 innocent lives in Georgia? What's the correlation? As I said, $36 trillion of debt that American taxpayers have to pay back. Nobody's really talking about that. They want to tell you, yeah, that's true, but the southern border. They say they're bringing drug prices down. How did they get so high that people had to decide if they're going to take the insulin or not? People were dying. But don't worry about that. Look at the southern border. These storms, these wildfires that are ravaging the West Coast, whole homes sliding down mountains from torrential rains, wildfires, billions of dollars in losses. But forget about that. The southern border is what you need to look at. Education in this country used to be the envy of the world. Now people are sending their children out of this country for an education. But that's not important. Look at the southern border. America's manufacturing base gone. We had Bethlehem Steel here right here in Pennsylvania that provide high quality, good paying jobs. It's closed down. Now we're importing what they call second-hand steel, cheap steel from guess where? China. But forget that. Look at the southern border. Forget everything I said and just focus all of your attention on the southern border. When you do that, what happens is, for those of us that grew up in New York, we know how people would walk up to you, say on 42nd Street, we used to call 40 Deuce back in the day. And somebody say, hey man, you know what time it is? And while you looked at your watch, the other person would steal your wallet. And when the person in front of you got the signal that the other person, his accomplice had the wallet, he said, all right, thank you. And you would walk off. A few minutes later, you realize, I don't have my wallet anymore. But that's basically what happened with the southern border. While you're looking at the southern border, your taxes are going up. Or they will. While you're looking at the southern border, gas prices are remaining high. So are food prices. Jobs for people who are returning from war, where are they? So folks, I just wanted to come on and share that with you. You know, sometimes you have to just say what's on your mind and speak from the heart and let this country know that all of us are not asleep. All of us are not falling for the game. Hey, look over here. Don't pay no attention to all of the trouble going on in this country. Just direct all your attention to one place, the southern border. And here in Pennsylvania, every U.S. senator keeps talking about the southern border. I don't know, but the southern border is not like 6 miles from here. Why the hell do I care what's going on hundreds of miles away when just hundreds of feet away people are starving? People are sleeping in cars, whole families. Yet you tell me the greatest enemy is the southern border. No, the greatest enemy is and has always been right there in Washington, D.C. The people we call our leadership are the ones who are doing us the most harm. So, folks, it is now 8 p.m. and that's my hour. But I just wanted to come on and express my outrage after seeing the footage of these 4 people who lost their lives needlessly. I blame our government and their lack of action. And folks, since we're the government, we're responsible too because we allowed them to get away with this. So, folks, come back and join us again next Thursday. In fact, Monday through Sunday, there's always something going on in Genesis Radio. Check us out. We have some great music, great lineup, great stories you're going to hear here, and some information that hopefully feeds the mind and the soul. So we're going to see you again next Thursday.